Working on a farm every day. I'm gonna read a book and look at bugs. It's the Ceremonies.
Welcome to Staring at the Abyss. I'm your host with a human spider face, Richard Gerlach. With me, as always, is spider number 1, Michael Patrick Hicks. Spider number 2, Matt Brandenburg.
I don't know the spider bit.
Demon Cat, Villamay Mist. And we're discussing the 80s horror tome, The Ceremonies by T.E.D. Klein.
The classic, the ultimate classic.
Making the argument that sometimes buried classics maybe deserve to stay buried.
Right.
Can we argue if this is a classic?
I've heard nothing but praise about this book the entire time I've been involved in the horror field.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, and I actually went on Goodreads yesterday as I was reading it. I was like, what? This book must have a lot of 1 stars, but nope. It has a lot of 5 stars, and everyone's praising it.
This book is very highly renowned. I think, we'll get into it later, I think that in the 80s, this book must have hit differently than it hits today.
Yeah, especially with the farming community.
And the Amish community, and the pagan community.
My personal theory is that this book was released around the time of Harrison Ford's Witness.
Oh, yeah.
And everyone was super big into, like, Amish fiction. And they're like, you know what we really need is, like, an Amish horror story. But
not
without any horror, they just need to sit around and eat lamb and roasts
and talk down about everything else that is not Amish.
Right. Yep. And farm. And
add in a nice tentacle scene by the end.
Yes.
We're good to go.
I kind of forgot about that, but now that you're bringing it up,
I don't remember.
I shall bring it up because it disturbed me.
I spent 2 fucking weeks on this thing, and I don't remember hardly one fucking thing about it, other than it bored the shit out of me.
It's funny because I listened to our most recent podcast, which was with Bo Johnson, and that was like we recorded that probably at the beginning of September. Yeah, and I was reading it then, so I was like, I don't even I had to flip through this morning and be like, what was this book called?
Yeah. Well, we'll get into this. I mean, it's a 600-page book that pretty much nothing happens, but we'll get into that.
Yeah,
we'll tell you all about the nothing.
But before we get into the nothing, we got some things we'd like to recommend. I think I found my horror movie of the year.
Uh-oh.
It is The Medium on Shudder.
Oh, I thought for sure maybe you watched Halloween Kills.
I have actually heard disappointing things about Halloween Kills.
I am really bummed. I've been hearing a lot of that. Like, I've been hearing a mix, I should say, but...
Yeah, my Twitter feed has been like, you either love it or you absolutely hate it. So it's divisive.
It's on Peacock for $10, so I might just put $10 for a month of Peacock.
I'm a Peacock captain. Kills. You gotta let me fly.
But no, so Halloween Kills, I've been looking forward to it all year. The first trailer had me psyched.
Yes.
And I was just like, ooh, this is going to be good. And then the early reviews came out, and it wasn't sounding too promising, but they sounded like I expected it to be. It's the second movie of a trilogy.
Yeah.
And before you see the third movie, the second movie usually doesn't hit until the context of all 3 are put together.
Yeah.
The thing that really has my interest peaked are all these firemen protesting the movie and wanting the opening scene cut.
Oh, wow.
Get over yourself, dude.
Imagine being an adult.
Yes.
And seeing Empire Strikes Back in theaters, not knowing anything about Return of the Jedi, and having that ending. A lot of people, from what I read reviews when it came out, had a very negative reaction to that movie at first.
Really?
And then after Jedi came out, everything kind of came back full circle because the full picture was finally revealed.
That's interesting. I always thought Empire, but maybe it's just because I grew up in an era in which it's universally hailed as one of the greatest sequels of all time.
Yeah.
I never looked back at the original reviews.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the same for the Rob Zombie Halloween. Now, the first one is a bit rough, but everyone now is saying how much they love the second one, which at the time was the same thing. Everyone hated it. They said it was crazy pants. But, so who knows? Sequels are sequels.
Indeed. But the
score is good.
I didn't listen to the score.
Oh, I got it. It's good.
But The Medium is not a sequel.
Yes, tell us about The Medium.
So it's...
We'll stop talking over you.
It could be a really good companion piece to Midnight Mass. It is a faux documentary, or I guess you could say a mockumentary, kind of found footage, but it tries to present itself as a documentary. And it's about a woman who is a shaman, and her family are shamans of a spirit called Bayan. And Bayan is a kind spirit in Thai folklore and helps people. And our shaman goes to visit her sister, who we find out her sister was supposed to be the shaman and take in Bayan's spirit, but the sister converted to Christianity to not have to walk the shoes of a shaman, which is kind of shunned upon, like in Thai culture. And raised her daughter Christian away from any of the Bayan shaman stuff. And now her sister... or her daughter, I should say, is acting strange. Sometimes she is acting like a child. Sometimes she's acting like an old man with dementia. Sometimes she's acting like an alcoholic. And sometimes she's acting like a prostitute. And they think this is Bayan, like, possessing her. And she doesn't have the ability to control the spirit. So she decides to enter a ritual to help her niece and send Bayan into her. And let's just say that this talks a lot about faith and how faith can often mislead us, what happens when we undergo crises of faith, and how you shouldn't really fuck with spirits.
Yep.
No.
Because by the end, this turns into one of the most batshit possession movies I've ever seen.
Oh, wow.
We're talking cannibalism. We're talking gore. We're talking blood. We're talking like an army of possessed people. We're talking the batshit crazy, just over the top possession stuff. It's about 2 hours long, and it's a slow burn. So, because it's presented as a documentary, and it's more of a character study as things slowly unravel. And by the end, like the last 30 minutes, it's just like, here's what you came here to see. And it's fucking wild. But it does have a lot to say about like faith, what it means to have faith, what crises of faith can lead us to, and what blind faith can also do to people. And I think in that sense, it's a good companion piece to Midnight Mass. But it's looking at things from like a Thai culture, because this is actually a Thai movie. So it's very focused on like Thai culture and shamanism, and you get like a different perspective of a theme that we might know through like Christian stories, or we might know in stories referencing Christianity, but we're seeing it from a different culture, which I think makes it a bit more interesting. But the movie itself was, once the possession stuff kicks in, it becomes a pretty batshit crazy horror movie. And I was very impressed. You also have beautiful shots of the Thai countryside if you're into that as well.
Nice.
Very cool.
Yeah, that sounds pretty awesome.
I will say a soft warning for some viewers, though. There is an animal death that's off camera, but it's still pretty gruesome. And there's a baby eating scene.
Oh, no.
Thanks for the warning.
Yeah.
So, just to give you a heads up.
Wow.
There's
I can imagine that must have been like a kind of a shocking scene.
Really all it is you see the character grab a dog and then walk off camera, and you hear the character put it into a pot.
Oh, God.
Yelp. And then later there's cooked dog food that's still liver and everything.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. All right. It's good to know.
The way you were kind of describing the ending, is this like another Thai movie that's sort of evil and Evil Dead inspired?
No, I'd say this is more Exorcist inspired.
Okay.
What's happened in this one is, I'm not going to spoil too much, but if anyone wants, this is spoilers, so fast forward if you don't want spoilers. They stopped the ceremony halfway through, so Ba-Yan was unable to enter the daughter, which leaves the daughter as an open vessel, and all the spirits of the dead hop into this body.
Oh, fuck.
And we're talking any kind of dead, including insects, animals, people, children. All the dead spirits begin pouring into this body. And at the end, they try to perform a ritual to exorcise her and expel all these spirits. And it fails. And all these spirits find other bodies to enter. So you have like these people who are the possessed spirits of like jungle cats that are like jumping on other people, ripping out their throats and shit.
Do they get like all Andy Serkis in their acting? Do they really?
They do.
They get all into.
They get on all fours and they're hissing and they're jumping on people and throwing people down.
Nice,
excellent.
And yeah, it gets wild. There's plot reasons for what's happening that I won't get into, but just so you're aware, like it gets pretty crazy with what it's trying to do. And if you're into Asian horror, remember that movie that came out starring Kiefer Sutherland, Shudder?
No.
No one saw Shudder with Kiefer Sutherland?
I just watched the Thai version, the original.
Yeah, so the director of the original Thai version of Shudder directed this.
Oh.
That's his newest movie. And it's a co-production between Thailand and Korea. There's like some Korean tie-in and stuff as well. But
so it's guaranteed fucked upness.
And Southeast Asian horror has been really fucking good recently.
I know. Like it's just so good.
Between like the Indonesian stuff and between this, like did I talk VHS 94 last week?
You did.
Yeah, like between the Indonesia stuff happening, between this, like I'm all aboard whatever Southeast Asian directors are doing right now for horror.
Same. Awesome. I'm all aboard for that.
But Mike, what about you?
Well, kind of a similar tack. I am currently reading, I'm about 3/4 of the way through Hunter Shea's Faithless, which, as you might be able to determine from the title, is kind of following on. I apparently have inadvertently got into a religious horror kick between the Ceremonies and Midnight Mass and now Hunter Shea's Faithless, and I'm going to need some really hard sci-fi after all this God stuff.
My next recommendation will be a sci-fi recommendation for you, Mike.
Oh, very nice. Well, I will stay tuned for that. Hunter Shea's... Oh, well, go on. You go ahead.
Is this bringing up repressed memories from your time as an altar boy?
No, thankfully I never set foot in a church except for a couple weddings that I was absolutely bored to tears by and couldn't wait to get out of.
Yeah, I was the altar boy.
Yeah, Matt's the one with all the repressed memories.
All the trauma coming back.
Yeah,
all the trauma.
He just wanted to make the Father happy, Michael. Come on.
Yeah.
I need to get closer to God.
Stay away from my bathing suit parts, Father.
That's what God wanted.
Anywho.
That was a nice long pause.
In Faithless, a preacher's wife and children are brutally murdered in the opening pages, and he needs to escape from his grief, and he goes up into his deceased aunt's house that he has inherited up in the Appalachians in order to drink himself to death.
Fair.
And it turns out that he is being haunted by the ghosts of his wife and children. And it's kind of along the lines, it starts off pretty slowly. It's very character focused on this preacher, Raul. And it's kind of in the vein of Hunter Shea's Creature and We Are Always Watching, where you've got this slower, more character focused, more driven plot. But as it goes along and you start to get into the haunting aspects, Shea is about the halfway mark, really starts ramping things up and gets into some really creepy moments. And I have not finished it yet, but I am going to go ahead and give this a good recommendation because 3/4 of the way through, I'm loving it. And once I got to the halfway mark, I was absolutely hooked by some of the reveals that are going on in here. But it does kind of play around with those elements of faith and losing your faith. And I'm curious to see if some of the usual tropes play out here. Usually when you have a man of the cloth losing his faith, by the end of it, he's going to get it back and he'll be restored because of all that religious virtue nonsense. But there's also a cat who's introduced in Act 1, so
You're not talking about the ceremonies?
No, I'm not, although that is kind of an interesting parallel, isn't it? But I'm wondering if, like in the ceremonies, it's kind of like Chekhov's cat. You introduce a cat in Act 1, by Act 3, they're dead.
Yeah. Or they killed everybody.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens with the cat. I don't know if it's going to become a vessel to slaughter everything or if it's just going to be another hapless victim. And I hope it's not the latter, or really the former. Just leave the fucking cat alone is my hope.
Maybe it starts talking.
Yeah, maybe. But I'll tell you what, I have been, and we've talked about this a bit off show, I have just been completely burnt out on trying to keep up with reviews and reading, and this has taken me a little while to get through, which is why I did not finish it in time for today's show. But I'm looking forward to our vacation, you guys, so much.
Got a few more episodes booked.
Oh, man.
I know. This is going to be a hard.
You can do it. I have faith in you.
Here. Yeah, I know.
If it makes you feel better, Mike, I've read the story.
For me is what I'm saying.
I've read the story for next week already, and it's really fucking good.
Okay, I got to figure out what that is. I haven't looked yet.
I gave you the book. Everyone has an arc of the story we're doing next week.
Oh, then I guess I should find it.
I emailed it a while ago.
Okay.
Well, there you go. You have it.
But
supposedly.
You should. If not, let me know. But
okay.
It's a good one. It's not the ceremonies, so there's that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's always a bonus.
Matt, what about you?
Oh, man. All right. So lots of things, but I'll just pick two right now, and then maybe when we come around, I'll talk about the other one. Real quick, because it's October, I've been kind of doing some more spooky stuff, so I was reading about a bunch of Edgar Allan Poe, and then I came across this story of his called Diddling.
There's nothing I love more than stories about Edgar Allan Poe diddling.
Well, let me tell you, because he uses that word a lot in this story, and the story's not
diddling.
Well, apparently back then, diddling might have had a different context than what we have now. It's like an essay, and it's not a scary one. It's I don't know if it's his attempt at humor or something, but basically in this story, diddling is kind of like a grift. So you're grifting people, and instead of saying grifting, you're diddling. And the person that is doing the diddling, much like a grifter is grifting, is a diddler.
So I diddly do.
Yeah. And let me tell you.
Is his name Ned Flanders?
Yeah, I mean, he could be Ned Flanders. It's very close. He uses diddling and diddler so much that, like, you just... I don't even know. It's insane, and it's all about doing grifts and, like, you know, tricking. Like one of the diddles is going into a bar asking for some tobacco. When somebody gives you the tobacco, you say, "Oh, this isn't my kind. I'll take a gin and water or whatever." You drink the gin and water, and then you leave, in which the bartender says, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he said, "Well, there's your tobacco. Everything should be fine." He's like, "Yeah, but you didn't pay." He's like, "Well, no, you wanted your tobacco back," and then leaves with the bartender confused and the diddle having commenced with the free drink. So it's all that kind of stuff. You find a wallet and you say you're going to give it, and the guy's going to give you a reward, but how about you give me some money, and then the reward will just all go to you. And It's insane. Not what I expected from Edgar Allan Poe, and I'd never heard of this story before, but is quite entertaining. So definitely look up Diddling if you want something. Well, safe search Diddling, and maybe Edgar Allan Poe as well, and then you'll be good to go. Just to be safe. But the main thing I want to talk
about, the moral is don't go into Pornhub and try to search for Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah, you might get what you don't expect, which is all about grifts. So, you might want some of that Poe porn, and you don't get it.
I guess Diddling is grifting back then.
Yeah, I guess so. Or he was just totally being a goofball and thought it would be funny to use the word diddling instead of grifting. I don't know. Poe's a strange character. But the main thing I want to talk about is Jonathan Raab's The Secret Goatman Spookshow. This is his collection of short stories, and they are all amazing. He is... I mean, I've loved his work. I think I first read his stuff in, which actually came from his press, but Terror in 16 Bits, which was all video game short stories. And then I read Secret, what was it? Camp Ghoul Mountain.
Camp Ghoul Mountain Part 4.
Or 4, or whatever it is. And that's an amazing fake movie novelization that kind of goes into his weird world with lots of footnotes and what actually is happening in this movie. Anyway, his collection is just this amazing thing. He's just like the master of found footage and also kind of twisting things into this weird kind of conspiracy world. The Goatman shows up in a number of the stories. He has a story he wrote with Matt Bartlett that is tied to WXXT in Leeds, but also tied to one of his own short stories in here. Jonathan Raab was in the military, so we kind of have that connection, but he uses a lot of that in his short stories, just his time overseas and kind of the doldrums and slow grind of death of serving every single day and not having a lot of fun while you're serving. So he has he twists a lot of that, and that's kind of what ties into this WXXT with this group hunting down a secret radio broadcast as making people go insane. But yeah, it's just this amazing collection. There's a lot of like dark humor in it. If you know his stuff, you totally get that. But just he does this awesome thing with found footage and or like there's a video game based on what he calls Behold the Undead Dracula. He actually kind of Crypt of Blood is kind of based on that, but then he also has like another anthology that's kind of tied to this gothic horror, Hammer horror stuff. But anyway, in this short story, there's a video game based on it, and a lot of weird things happen for people playing this video game. And the story is actually an interview with the person that's writing a book about this video game. So he kind of does this like super layered kind of thing. He's so awesome doing these things because he makes it seem like it's a real game and a real movie, but then there's all this little creepiness added to the fact that it's what happened around it. And it's super awesome. I absolutely adored it. I highly recommend this. I think Jonathan Raab, he's so under the radar. I know we've talked a lot about people being under the radar, but I think he's definitely one that like is like on the brink, but like not enough people are paying attention to him because he's doing some amazing work. So
I have to check that one out. I've read Camp Ghoul Mountain Part 4 and I fucking loved it.
Yes.
So I need to read more from him.
Definitely. I have pretty much all of his shit, and I have not read hardly any of it, and I really need to get my act together on that one. The one that really drew me in, as soon as I saw the title, it's like I had to buy it, and I've been buying everything that he has released since then, was the Hillbilly Moonshine Massacre.
Yeah.
And I have been telling myself every year since I bought it, it's like, this is the year I'm going to read it. And then it always gets pushed to the side, and I am sick. I hate myself.
It's like, this is John Raab related, but like I bought Christine Morgan's Sperm Jackers from Hell back in 2016.
Yeah.
I still haven't read it. And every year I'm like, I'm going to read it. And then I don't.
I am putting to the floor here a motion that we do that for our Valentine's episode.
I love it.
I like that idea.
All right, unanimous approval.
All right. Valentine's episode approved. Philip, what about you for this last week?
Well, I'm still suffering from burned out, and that kind of includes everything that I like, which sucks.
Yeah.
But this entire week I've just been trying to read this fucking book, this tome of, and I say this with quotation mark, classics. And I finally had like the day off yesterday, and I forced myself to finish it. Like, I'm not kidding. I started reading it like at noon, and I finished it at midnight.
Oh man.
Yeah.
We appreciate the effort that you put forth.
That's dedication. Thank you.
You better.
We really do.
You gave me like specific instructions last week. Like, you have homework. You better finish it. And I didn't wanna. Fail. Like the perfectionist in me, the good student in me was like, no, I can't, because if I had been reading this just on my, just regular time, if I just picked it up by myself, I would have DNF'd it ages ago.
Honestly, I would have DNF'd it too if we weren't doing it for the podcast. But we'll also get into. I think we all would have DNF'd it if we weren't podcasting it.
Yeah.
So
it's like I have so much shit to read, and I'm spending 2 weeks on this fucking 600-page snail pace.
So, Villanelle, we suffered together when it came to this book.
It was a bonding experience for all of us. We all went through hell,
and now we're going to unleash hell on a few.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I finished Midnight Mass.
Oh yeah.
What did you think of the ending?
It was really satisfying. It was both sad, of course, spoiler alert, everyone almost dies.
Yes.
And I didn't want Sheriff to die. He was the fucking best character.
Yeah. He had a great death though.
He really did. And I was like, damn it, he should have lived.
Yeah, that was rough.
It was rough. I also loved the portrayal of Bev at the end. They just showed her being this kind of coward, and I'm like, yeah, that's what you are, bitch.
Yes.
Can't even accept your own fate. Yeah, when she was digging the hole and crying. I don't want to die. Like, you die, bitch. Kind of punched my fist into the air when she went on fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was the true villain of the show.
She really was, like, twisting everything about what the Father Paul was saying, and But the second to last episode, that really got to me. It got me shook.
Yeah, that was that Jonestown massacre scene is really hard to watch.
Yes, it was so hard, especially when they were forcing the kids to drink, and I was like, no, this is.
Or like what hit me really hard too is like Lisa after her parents turned, and they were trying to like drink her blood, and I was like, you motherfuckers.
Yep, it was just really hard, but I also liked the transformation of Paul. I didn't like him at first, but then as he, when the love of his life shot him in the head, and he was like, oh, okay, so maybe the things I did was wrong.
Well, I mean, he has my favorite line in the series is in the finale after he comes out of the church and he's with, I forget her name, the woman who he loves and his daughter.
Mildred, I think it was named.
Yeah, Mildred. And he looks around, he's seeing all the carnage, and he just goes, "We're the wolves."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite lines of the show.
Yeah.
The guy playing that preacher was phenomenal.
Hamish Linklater? That's his name.
Yes. Thank you. I forgot it.
Yeah, he's a really good actor. I really hope Flanagan uses him more, because Flanagan loves reusing actors.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to see him in more stuff, because he was great. I also loved like the "We're the Wolves" line. I think it hits really hard, and that was a really good line. Yeah. I also loved just his realization to everything.
Mm-hmm. Like especially when he comes to and he looks at the door and he's like, you opened the door.
Yes.
And Bev is like, yeah, why shouldn't I? And he's like, you were not supposed to.
Yeah.
It was just supposed to be the chosen ones and everything, and they weren't, and he was supposed to explain everything what was going to happen and not to make them into these kind of
monsters.
Frenzied monsters. And then when he sees it, he's like, oh great, everything's fucked up.
But it's also
I don't care anymore.
Those people just turned so fast too.
They did, yeah.
Like with Pruitt, he really fought the urge for like a long time.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't give in to the urge until after he cracked open that guy's head. Yeah. But even so, like, when that whole thing happened, he was trying to fight it the entire time until he got too close and it came to the end. But you had Riley's parents who never fed. Like, they resisted the urge.
I love their determination.
Yeah, I liked it. I had some issues when you start kind of like looking at it, like how come he was able to be in the sun at the beginning and yet all of these people were not?
Because he hadn't died yet.
Yeah, he hadn't died and he hadn't fed on anyone yet.
Because in the beginning he could only stay in the sun because he just drank the blood. Like, the vampire didn't fully kill him. And he just drank the vampire's blood, so he hadn't died. So, because in the show, vampire mythology is when we consume the blood of the angel, or the sacrament, if you will. It stays in our bloodstream, and that's how it gives us the healing power.
Yeah, you saw in the end when everyone was burning. The last line of the show was Lisa saying, "I can't feel my legs anymore."
Right.
Yeah, but
the thing that really threw me was how the preacher was able to drink his own blood to satisfy his cravings.
Yeah. Like when did he die?
He died in episode 2. Episode 2.
How?
I think he had an aneurysm or something. It was just like a medical thing, probably from.
To me, I thought it wasn't specifically said, but I thought he was being slowly poisoned from Bev.
You think so?
Bev was always.
I thought maybe he starved himself to death.
We had all those scenes with Bev and the rat poison.
Right.
Bev had full access to the rat poison.
But I don't know.
Pruitt died the same way the dog died. Like when he fell back in the chair and he was foaming in the mouth. That's when he died.
Interesting.
That day he was feeling sick. It seems like she was. Because at first when he was sick, I thought him using his power to make the girl walk, the girl walking, I thought he was using some sort of power when that first happened.
Yeah.
And then when it's vampires, that changed my whole thought on it. Then when I realized how the dog dies, how the people die when they drink the poison, it relates to the same way that he died. And when those people died, they drank like a cup full of poison. Right. But if you're being poisoned little by little, it's going to build up and then have that big effect, but it's going to be over time. So that's why, because Bev never seemed to trust him from the beginning. So I thought Bev was trying to undermine him or get him out of the picture so she could still be enjoying what she had.
I like that theory.
It was more subtext than
that was pretty deep subtext. I get that because that does make sense. That does look exactly the same, the way he's spitting up all that stuff. But man, that was super deep to not have that reference at all. Like, I mean, like we see the rat poison and we know the dog died and we know it was her, but to have her be poisoning the Monsignor is just like crazy. I get it, but man, one little hint would have been nice.
Yeah, she didn't know it was the Monsignor until after he died. And then she saw the picture on the wall, and then she was like, oh. And then she started connecting dots after that.
Yeah.
But she didn't know, because the only person who knew that he was the Monsignor was Mildred.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No one else knew because no one else knew him when he was in his 30s, but Mildred did.
Yeah. So
also, I want to say one thing. Elliot from E.T. is a really good actor.
Yeah. It was funny because, like, you know, and I, you know, people probably talked about this, but when you first watched first couple episodes, and you're like, why are all these people in old people makeup? And then you then you realize what's happening. But at first, you're like, that's a really odd choice. Like, they couldn't find older actors, but I mean, obviously we know why, but.
That's actually the first thing that my husband pointed out. He's like, "Why is the makeup so bad?" And then, you know, as we progressed in watching the series, he's like, "Oh no, okay, now that makes more sense." Like,
and that, like, again, I like that, but that felt a little. And I don't know how you would have done that otherwise, but it was a little showing your hand just to be like, okay, well, clearly they're all going to come back to normal because. You wouldn't have these actors in old person makeup if you weren't going to do that. Not that that's a bad thing, but at the time I was like, all right, well, we know something's going to happen with them and they're all going to get younger. And then, yeah. And so, well, that's interesting about Pruitt. I didn't think about that. And I guess the other thing, and everybody's talked about it, but just the fact that, like, how come they didn't know they were vampires right from the start?
I mean, I said this last week, I think, but I prefer that, like, if we're watching a vampire series or show or movie or book or a zombie or any of those monsters, that within the world of the story, this monster doesn't exist. So it's something kind of new to the people. I think it's a good way to add tension to the story. But it can be frustrating for us because they've been such a popular part of our pop culture for a long time. It can create a disconnect.
Yeah.
But I enjoy that.
Yeah, when we go on, Matt.
I was just going to say that's a little rough, especially when, like, I don't know. Like, I get that, but at the same time, it's like you've clearly established they're in the modern world. They have cell phones. They have the sheriff has a Nintendo. They have posters for Seven and X-Files. So, like, they have a poster for X-Files. I believe there's a vampire story in the X-Files.
There's a few of them, yeah.
Yeah, there's more than one.
How, like, you just can't explain it that way without, like, cutting, like, if they cutting that they're not in our, yes, we don't have vampires in the real world, but we know what they are and we would recognize those signs.
You think we would?
Yeah. Yes. We all know about burning blood.
Matt,
yeah, if I got stuck in a cave and this giant winged creature came and drank my blood, I'd be kind of like, I think I know what's wrong.
And I'm still alive afterward.
Yeah.
Matt, you've seen who was president for the last 4 years.
Yes.
You really think that?
I think there intelligent people who have read a book.
Yeah. Or watched the X-Files or played Nintendo with Castlevania would know about a vampire.
Maybe not some dipshit Trump voter, I'll give you that. They don't know their ass from a hole in the ground, but those of us who actually have read books will be able, I think, to recognize a vampire when we see one and not be like, oh, it's an angel.
And even if you're like, it's crazy, I don't want to tell people it's a vampire, you would still have a pretty good idea and be like, something wrong is going on here. There's people drinking blood and burning in the sunlight. I think I'm going to back away from this story.
Yeah. And I'm the point, like, when that episode opened with the box full of dirt behind the counter. Like, oh, it's Barlow. He brought Barlow. Okay, no one in this town has read Salem's Lot. Are you fucking kidding me? Like, none of them have seen 30 Days of Night. Nothing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or, like, watch TV during October. There's commercials with vampires. There's Count Chocula. Did none of them have Count Chocula?
It's like
the kind of posit in this world that they don't know what vampires are. It's like, okay, well, we have to eliminate several episodes of the X-Files from their existence. There's no vampire books. They don't have AMC in October.
Like, I would totally get, and again, I'm not complaining. It's a great show. I don't, that aspect of things always kind of throws me off a little. Like, and I would get if they were completely secluded in, like, you know, the Amish and the ceremonies kind of thing, where they don't know about the outside world, then I would totally get it. Yep. No, they don't know what vampires are. But we've seen that. They get on a ferry and they go to the mainland and they have phones. So, like, I don't know.
They have a Muslim sheriff. So
so like they know these things. And I did like the idea of the priest being so into believing these things that he would believe that was an angel. And like they do justify it, like, oh, angels are scary things, and like totally I'm on board. A priest wants to believe it, Bev wants to believe it, all these really hard going churchgoers want to believe it, but they were all churchgoers, so they should have known pretty quick.
I did love the image of the vampire wearing the
the priest's outfit.
The priest's
vestments. Yeah. For me, though, it gets to the point where you're talking about like they don't have vampires in this world. I always want to see like a deeper exploration of that ripple effect.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, what is their world like without this one thing? Where it's like, okay, well, they don't have vampires, so there's no Bram Stoker, so there's no H.P. Lovecraft, which means there's no Robert Bloch, which means Reagan never read this book and never ran for president, so Jimmy Carter was president again, and it ended up being like a nuclear apocalypse, and like I'm always kind of curious about like what happens when you remove this one element, because it's that butterfly effect. If you take out vampires, it's like there's going to be bigger repercussions throughout history.
Exactly. And that would be cool. And that's kind of what roundabout way of, I want that too. I want them to be like, show us something that would make us go like, okay, they don't know what vampires are.
Yeah.
Either that, or, just have like the scene, for example, when the vampire enters the church, one just maybe screaming, that is a fucking vampire, and everyone then the priest maybe, he with his charm, he might be able to say, no, it's not, it's an angel, don't you see how angelic it looks, something to convince the guy who was a little bit like off.
I did kind of laugh though when Mildred shot Pruitt in the head and the vampire like flew 60 miles an hour.
Yeah,
that's my baby.
You killed my Renfield.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's what I kept saying.
Well, they don't know what a Renfield is, really.
No, they don't.
I kept thinking of that for Bev, and obviously they turned her, but I was like, I would have loved if he never turned her, and she always wanted to be, because then she totally was a Renfield, and I was like, that's awesome.
But I think to kind of eliminate vampires from their world it's kind of like trying to write a horror story in 2022 and there's no cell phones.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things where it's kind of like, well, I know you kind of had to do this in order to tell the story you wanted, but I'm calling bullshit on it.
I
just kind of always have cell phones in my stories. I incorporate cell phones in my story.
Yes.
Oh man. Yeah, I would have loved it if they were like playing a Nintendo and they're like, oh, what? I wish I could play this game about like these monsters and some guy with a whip.
If only I could be Simon Belmont.
Yeah. Oh, that would have been amazing.
Oh, about this guy named Alucard? I wonder what his name is.
Or they're at the grocery store and there's like all the everything except Count Chocula.
Only store brand.
Yeah, it's like Boo Berry and all the other monsters.
I have two more real quick. I finished an audiobook last week that'll make Mike very happy. I finished Barry Eisler's Leave Me Alone.
Oh, yes.
Which, if you want a really dark, harrowing, fucked up thriller about human sex trafficking, read that book. It's like if Jack Ketchum wrote a thriller with a badass woman protagonist. It would be Leave Me Alone.
Yeah, it is not a light read by any means.
Really heavy, and there's a lot of sex abuse in that book. Yeah. That is very hard to get through. But it pays off really well in the end when all these horrible people get what's coming to them. Mm-hmm. I need to read more of Barry Eisler's stuff, but already he's shaping up to be a really good thriller writer for me.
Oh, he's fantastic, I think. I love his stuff.
And then I started reading, I think this will fit in with Mike needing something fresh, Revelation Space by Alistair Reynolds.
In fact, I just got an arc of his new one, Inhibitor Phase, which is set in the Revelation Space
universe.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, I have that arc too.
Nice. That's awesome.
I don't know if Inhibitor Phase takes place after these ones. I know he has the trilogy and then other books that just take place in that world. But if you want to talk about like hard sci-fi concepts and bleak like nihilism, this is the guy to go to, because wow, this book is pulling no punches. It's like if H.P. Lovecraft wrote hard science fiction, it would be Alistair Reynolds.
Nice.
Yeah, it's about once a race becomes technologically proficient enough to become spacefaring, the technology awakens a race that goes around and destroys these species.
Yeah.
And prevents them from becoming spacefaring. So you have a great big end of humanity apocalypse in space.
And then the post-humanity apocalypse in space.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's a lot. It's super hard to even describe. But if you really if you want to check out like modern hard sci-fi that's not like super action heavy, because I love like the Expanse books by James S.A. Corey. Like, those are so much fun. Yes. If you want the other end of the spectrum that's, like, more somber and serious, Alistair Reynolds is a really good go-to for that.
Yeah, they're pretty dense, thick books, though. Lots of history going into those books.
He did say, I watched an interview with him earlier, and he did say that if his biggest regret of his first book, which was Revelation Space, was making it too complex for the reader. He's like, because the book takes place in like 5 different time periods all happening at the same time, but they're in different years because they're light years apart from each other. He said he'd make that easier to follow if he were writing it now. Yeah, but it was his first book, and he didn't really know what he was doing in that sense.
Oh man, that's crazy.
Well, I know Chasm City was a lot easier to follow. That one was more of a noir kind of story. Detective piece in space.
The only other thing I will say is I watched No One Gets Out Alive, and I was very disappointed.
Ooh.
But the monster was cool. That's all I'll say about that. The book was much better.
See, I told you.
The book was so much better.
I told you.
But that's it for me, if anyone else has anything.
If you like these kind of like the Netflix docuseries, they just recently released this about the 11 people murder in India, the Burari case.
Oh.
It's called House of Secrets, and I'm watching it right now. I just started it today, just before I'm hanging out with you guys. And I'm 2 episodes in, and it's looking so fucking weird.
Oh, crazy.
Perfect.
I totally recommend it right now. It's because, looking into other people's, cultures, and especially in this case, this was a really wide open case, and it was really famous. My husband actually mentioned that he remembered that this being broadcast in our news.
Wow.
And of course, I couldn't remember anything, so I had to watch it.
Oh,
and
crazy.
It's looking to be a very, very sinister-looking thing that happened to that family.
Oh, wow. House of Secrets?
Yeah.
All right. I'll have to watch that. I watched Willy's Wonderland.
Did you like it? Because I regretted spending $3 to rent that movie and never finished it.
I did. I had a lot of fun with it. It's absolutely stupid and crazy and bonkers, but I mean, come on. How do you not love Nicolas Cage being in a movie in which he literally does not talk through the whole movie? I mean, every time a character like talks to him, and he just kind of gives them this look, and it just goes on, and it's crazy. He loves pinball. He's an amazing cleaner, and it's a total like prototype for Five Nights at Freddy's movie. I think if I remember correctly, somebody's making that, right?
It was supposed to be Blumhouse, but it's been so long. I don't know if they're.
Yeah, I thought it moved to like somebody big, like
last one was Blumhouse.
Yeah, and then I heard it was like Spielberg picked it up or DreamWorks picked it up. Somebody, like I said, like a legit director picked up making this movie. I that's all I remember. I don't know for sure, but either way, this feels like somebody wanting to prove that they could do that. And so they're like, look, I'll make Willy's Wonderland. It's going to have all these animatronic things that run around in this Major Magic's Chuck E. Cheese type of place, and Nicolas Cage just drinks like pop every hour because he needs to take a break, and he's not going to talk, and he's going to be a complete badass that beats the crap out of every single robot and likes using duct tape to wrap his body up. And that's the movie, because it was so crazy. Oh man, I want it more. I did want they sort of throw in a story of like serial killers making this place so they can trap kids and kill them. And then the serial killers decide to do some, like, they're getting caught, so they do some satanic ritual to put their spirits into these robots. And what I wanted was them to be like, oh, well, Nicolas Cage is like the devil and he's come to collect their souls or something. But you don't get that. You have no idea if that's true or not. He just is a badass that can beat up robots and he doesn't talk. So it's barely an hour and a half. It's on Hulu. It's absolutely stupid. Do not go in expecting anything great, but it's like I'm positive it's a fun group movie if you're looking for that kind of thing.
I mean, I can do stupid. I watched I Think You Should Leave yesterday, and that's like one of my favorite sketch comedy shows. Yeah. And if you've seen I Think You Should Leave, you should know how stupid that show is.
Well, see, you gotta give this one another try because it's so dumb. You just have to go in knowing it's going to be dumb.
Leave is actually funny. This, I was just bored.
Oh no! A difference. I had a blast. It's insane.
Like to me, and this is a good segue into the Ceremonies. To me, the worst thing a book, movie, TV show, band could do is be good enough to be uninteresting.
Yeah.
And that's offensive to me. Like to put it bluntly, a couple years ago I spent like $100 to get front row tickets, or pretty much close to front row tickets, to see Slipknot. And I went to the show because I really wanted to see Behemoth. Like, I like Slipknot, but Behemoth was like the one band I really wanted to see. And the show was Behemoth, Gojira, Volbeat, and Slipknot, which is a weird bill if you think about it.
Yeah.
And so I get there, and traffic is so bad, I miss Behemoth.
Oh no.
And as I'm pulling in to get a parking spot, I can hear Gojira, and they're done by the time I actually get to the venue.
Aww.
And I get there, and guess who's next? Volbeat. And Volbeat is a band that does nothing for me. Like, they're good. They're proficient at their instruments. They can write good songs. They can, like, they are the definition of a good band, but they're boring to me. And they do nothing for me. And they should do something for me, but I find them so completely uninteresting that they bore me.
Yeah.
And I'd rather they suck, because that would interest me. And be boring. And that's the Ceremonies. The Ceremonies is a mundane book, and I think we can all agree Klein is a good writer. Like,
yeah.
He's a proficient writer. He has some great scenes. There's some dated sexism and racism in this book we'll get to. But he's a good writer, and this book does nothing.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of nothing in this book.
It's a whole lot of nothing. So to
it's
our
600
audience,
pages of nothing.
Yeah.
To our audience, if you have heard The Ceremonies is one of the greatest 80s horror books of all time, like I have many times before in the past, the answer is no, it's not.
Yep.
Read The Nest instead.
Should we recreate our Nest episode one of these days?
I do feel like we should reread that.
We should revisit The Nest sometime.
Oh my god. At least that was entertaining.
Yeah, this had some good parts here and there, but
there were elements that I thought were really going to start going places. Like he would slowly tease out some really interesting elements, and I was like, finally, we're going to get some meat, and it would just fizzle out. And I was like, all right, well, maybe next time. And then the next one would roll around like, oh, that's an intriguing thought. I wonder what's going to happen. And then it's like nothing. And then by the time something did happen, I completely forgot about whatever I had been interested about some several hundred pages earlier.
Yeah, like I was trying to figure out like what the point. What was what was the point of everything? I guess for people who are listening that luckily had not read this, I think the basic idea is there's this guy. What was the guy? The
Absalom, Applebottom.
Yeah, but
Rosebottom.
Rosie.
Rosie. Yes.
Rosie is what he called himself.
Rosie wants to, and you guys can fix this as I go, but Rosie wants to bring some evil demon back, and he's got to do it by getting a woman into this area that the spirit is buried in, I think.
And impregnate her so the spirit can go inside the womb.
Yeah, and then there's some reason there's a guy that has to be involved to do something, and then there's like these farmers. I if you could, I don't know what is like. I know his end game was to bring this demon back, but like the road that leads you to there isn't a road. It's just this big random mess of a thing that you have to climb through. Like I just don't know what the point was of 90% of this.
So I have the paperback in my hand right now. I also have the original 80s paperback next to me because I have this book twice. I originally bought the 80s paperback version of this. I read the newest one put out by PS Publishing. And this one has a quote on the back that says, and this is a Stephen King quote, hailed by Stephen King as, quote, the most exciting novel in the field to come along since Straub's Ghost Story.
I think that if time has taught us anything, it's that a Stephen King recommendation doesn't mean shit. The dude will blurb anything, okay?
But he says exciting. Nothing in this book was exciting.
No, I don't think he read it. I don't think he read this book. I
think he was too coked out of his mind to...
Yeah.
I mean, that might have been why he said it was exciting. His mind was just creating everything because it wasn't in the book.
Yeah, he was having DTs at the time he was blurbing. And I was like, oh, wow, this is crazy. Like, oh, look at all these things that are flying around in my face.
Or like Klein gave him like 2 sentences of what this book is supposed to be, and he's like, perfect. Let me just blurb that.
I think it was probably an element of like paying it forward. I think it was a kindness, and I think King does that a lot. Yeah. Because some of the stuff that I've read that he has blurbed, and I have bought it on the blurb of a Stephen King, and there's a lot of books that I wish I hadn't wasted my time on because of that. Until I finally fucking learned my lesson. That's like, okay, this blurb means nothing.
You know what I'm also going to stop wasting my time on? Novels adapted from short stories.
Yeah.
Sometimes a short story should stay a short story.
Yeah. And let me tell you, there is never a short story that could be like, oh, hey, you know what would really make this story better? 600 more pages.
Yeah.
About nothing.
Yeah, like what I'll tell people is like, if you're working on a short story and you're like, man, this thing's going to be long, just go for the long thing. Don't make the short thing and then try to do it again. Like that, I guess that worked for Chuck Palahniuk Fight Club. That was originally a short story. But like, other than that, yeah, I agree. When I read this and it I don't know, he must have like taken every other word and said, well, let me put 500 words or 500 pages in between these because it'll make sense.
Now,
all right, so
we read a few weeks ago Wet Work, which was originally based off of a short story. That one was okay, but it was also only a couple hundred pages.
Yeah.
It wasn't a 600-page tome.
Yeah.
And
no, to go from like a 30-page
was like super short.
Yeah.
Like it could have been adapted into and Wet Work as a novel has like action.
Yeah.
It has stuff happening.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
This is
not
people
this
eating
is the complete
food.
opposite.
You mean there's no action watching somebody read and write journal entries while he sits in like a
and make like really sexist comments about Shirley Jackson?
Yeah.
Ooh,
and, I mean,
that really annoyed me.
This guy just shits on everything. Like he's an unpleasant protagonist to be reading about. His headspace is just, he has this really false sense of superiority because he's a city boy. And that really seems to be the only defining characteristic that Klein can come up with for this guy.
And like even as like a city boy, he's not like tough, lived in a tough neighborhood city boy. He's just he just assumes that he's better than these bumpkins, but then at the same time he just sits around and does nothing.
Yeah. He does nothing.
Oh my God, this book. So what was the point of him?
I think you could just leave it right there. This book. What was the point?
So like our friars, I can't remember what his first name is. And again, Jeremy, he moves during the summer. He's going to go to this random very small community I guess he's getting ready to do a dissertation or a master's, or he's going to write a book. And so he's got to read all these old Gothic horror kind of things, like really old stuff. But I don't know what the point of it all was, because like we see it all in real time in this book. We see him reading and him describing what's happening. And I kept, Rich, like you, I think you said either at the beginning of this or before we record it, where I was like, oh, I got to really pay attention because there's going to be a clue here. There isn't. It's just him. Like, I don't know. Is Klein deciding to like make comments on all these people? I'm like, what is happening?
A lot of it seems like it's an excuse for him to put out his grudges against some of these other authors that have come before him.
Or to prove how smart he is by pulling these obscure names and titles out and just but in the end it served nothing.
Nope.
But I mean, Jeremy and the girl, I forget her name too, were
Carol.
They were moved around by Rosebottom.
Yeah.
Like chess pieces, but the whole point of it is just for them to sit there and wait for months. Like this guy is doing his thesis, but he gets the idea that he's going to rent this apartment on the poor oath's farm and sublet his apartment as a way to save money, and being out in the country will give him a chance to work on his thesis and get some exercise and lose some weight. And that's really his only motivation. Yeah. Behind the scenes, Rosebottom has maneuvered him in there because he's part of this grand ceremony that Rosebottom has envisioned. And the opposite end of that is Carol. And he's trying to maneuver them into a relationship so that Jeremy can, I think, impregnate her so that she can become the vessel for this demon.
Now that you say it, I wonder if it wasn't that, if the whole point was to get Carol out there. So if she had a relationship with Friars, Jeremy, then she would have then Rosebottom would have an excuse to get Carol out there. Yeah. Again, I'm just making this up now. That could be completely wrong, but I think that might have been the point, because he needed her out there and he couldn't figure out a way to get her out there unless she was entangled with him. But
what I just really again huge convoluted plan of Rosebottom's that doesn't make any fucking sense, especially like, oh, I have to find a virgin, oh, I better go to the city and find her. Like, why? weren't you living in an Amish community where you can't have fucking sex until you're married? So what the fuck?
Yeah, but it reminds me of like Ghostbusters 2, right, where Bill Murray's yelling at Vigo. It's like, oh, what, you're gonna find a virgin in New York now?
And also, like, again, I read the events at Porth Prom this morning, like reread it, and the Rosie stuff, like Rosebottom stuff, is what kills the story. Like, if you removed Rosebottom, and let's be fair, like Jeremy and I forget the woman's name,
Carol,
they both of them have no personality.
No. They are the most unengaging couple. Like, their fledgling romance has no spark whatsoever.
No, you just don't even get how the two are together.
I'm wondering if Stephanie Meyer had like read this book and just that was the spark of Edward and Bella.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there is nothing that draws these two. It's like, oh man, they're just such a great couple. I really can't wait to read about them hooking up and finally being together. And it's like
the will they won't they plot is so suspenseful.
Yeah. No, you know what? I think part of the problem is that I kept expecting there to be like a giant orgy between the farmers and Jeremy and Carol.
I would have. They're pagans. Get them naked. Have them fuck in the fields.
Yeah.
There, it will make it interesting.
And he kind of sets that.
An orgy scene would make this book interesting.
Oh yeah, I mean, if this book had it's 600 pages. If 300 pages of them would have been orgies, it would have been so much better. 500 pages of orgies, this thing could have been readable.
Oh my god!
At least you could have kept one hand busy that way.
Yeah, exactly. You know how many free Kindle titles of porn I have to download now to make up for reading this schlock?
Oh my god! And they sort of kind of set that up because the couple, was it Debbie and Sar, are he sets up that they're very horny for each other, which you're cool, they are, but at the same and then you kind of have this forced thing where our Jeremy kind of likes the farmer's wife, but I don't know. It so he's setting that all up. It could have easily happened and it would have made sense.
Yeah, I mean, God, he sees her ankles one time and he's ready to go.
Seriously. Oh my god!
Hey, man, those ankles though.
Yeah.
It's just, and you spend a lot of time with Carol in the library sorting books and helping kids. It's just
the thing is, I got interested in it when they were, when Rosie was telling her about the things that she was supposed to research.
Yeah. That was fun, and again,
interesting things throughout this story.
Yeah, there's enough slight teases that kind of kept me intrigued.
Nope.
Yeah.
But
I got there's nothing. A constant failure to deliver on any of them.
Because
yes.
The opening chapter is about it's a flashback to we don't know it at the time, but we're going to be getting into the big spoilers here of what little there is to spoil. Rosebottom is actually a couple hundred years old.
Yeah, and he's trying to bring back an entity that's kind of slumbering beneath the surface.
And the prologue is about him killing his family and setting this town on fire and basically destroying everything. And people, as it goes on, people are talking about they had seen a asteroid or a meteor shower that was a portent to this, or that lightning had set the fires, or that a red liquid bubbling from the ground was the cause of all of this violence. And it's okay, well, that red liquid bubbling, that's a really interesting idea, and I want to see more of that.
Yeah.
And I don't think we ever did after 600 pages.
No.
500 some pages into it, we get a giant hill that appears overnight.
And
just a few earthquakes.
Yeah.
And the ending is just a tease.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like literally like 3 pages, and then you're like, "Oh, we're done." It's like, wait, what?
It was,
and like
so anticlimactic.
The mythology of it is kind of neat in the sense that the Earth is basically an egg, and there's this dragon in it, and that's what Rosebottom is trying to dredge up.
And once it hatches, it'll destroy the Earth.
Yeah, but there's just so much mundane horse shit that goes on. Like, if ever there was a book that the phrase "it should have been an email" applied more to, it's this book. Like, this thing could have, we should have found like a Cliff Notes version of this thing.
Yeah, because there's a lot, there's some neat things that we keep saying. It's interesting when Rosie is slowly training Carol through the dancing,
grooming, not training.
Yeah, grooming. Good call. Good call. Grooming. So she was a dancer, and so he encourages her to dance more while they're in Central Park for a concert or something, and then is also teaching her to say these certain phrases and all these things. So you're like, oh, that's cool. And then you get stuff where Jeremy is, because he rented this kind of barn, not an outhouse, but a barn thing. And you get these really cool scenes of all these bugs that keep attacking, and he's killing off these bugs, and then there's a feral cat that goes crazy. And so you're like, cool, this is all awesome. But in between, there's 100 pages of Sar trying to bring his land back, and how the other people in this community are like, oh, he left the community and came back, so he's no good, and he owes us thousands of dollars, and oh, there's a city boy in our midst, and he shouldn't be welcome, and all this crap that you're cut that out. And then it'd be really cool. There's bugs and there's weird things happening, and you're like, cool, something's happening. But then it's just no, I got to waste all this time on them out at midnight to plant in season.
Yeah, I remember reading there's a point where they go to what passes for the library of this town, and Jeremy starts doing research on the murders because he hears about the ghosts at McKinney's Neck, I think it's called.
Yeah.
And so he starts learning about the murders Rosebottom committed as a child. I'm like, oh, wow, we're finally getting somewhere. And it's oh, nope, here's 50 pages about planting corn. And here's a 20-page thing about dinner. And we're going to have him lusting over Sar's wife. And Sar's going to give him a look. And then he's going to go back and he's going to read by himself in his apartment. And he's just going to sit there and shit on Bram Stoker and Shirley Jackson and
dude, I got so mad when he shit on Bram Stoker. He was like, what was it? He was like, I was reading Dracula, and once they got back to England, the novel just lost all of its tension for me.
Yes,
and I'm like,
when he was saying it was just about the women talking to each other, it just lost all its flavor, and I was like, fuck you.
I was like, motherfucker. Quincy Morris is the heart and soul of Dracula.
I was like, you want to read Quincy a book that doesn't have any tension, you can read the Ceremonies.
That's what I thought when he was saying this. I was like, wait, are you doing are you being meta here? Are you making fun of your own story?
Honestly, he has to know how mundane this story is. There's no way.
Oh yeah, didn't know. This is, to its credit, for as mundane as it is, I will say it is at least better than Billy Summers. So it has that going
Shots
for
fired.
it. Although, like Billy Summers, if I had the opportunity to quit this book, I would have.
I will say, I want to move over to the events at Porth Farm for a minute.
Yeah.
Just because that's the short story that inspired this. In Porth Farm, there is no Rosie.
Nice.
Jeremy's still the main character, but it takes place now in the 60s instead of the 80s. And he goes to this small town because he wants to escape the city and just read. And he takes a room with the Porths, the same characters as they are in the novel. He doesn't really lust after the wife like he does in the novel, though. That was added for the novel. He just hangs out there, he reads, and he starts seeing insects with human faces. like spiders with like human faces and kills them every time he sees them.
No, that makes sense.
And then he notices they have 7 cats, and one of the cats, Batwa, is very odd because he was the only one that's kind of been with the wife since like the beginning.
No, but wait, did they switched it?
The cat
because Batwa had been with Sar since the beginning in Ceremonies.
Yeah, he changed it then, unless I misread it in the short story. But either way, Batwa's the oldest cat, and Batwa dies, and then Batwa comes back, and it describes Batwa like walking odd, like kind of like someone who has a new body who doesn't know how to use it yet.
Yeah, they did the same description
same in the novel.
Ceremonies. Yeah.
Then Batwa dies for real. Then another cat dies. That cat comes back again, and this thing keeps happening. Then in the climax, there is a struggle that happens, and Sar kills his wife. And after his wife killed one of the cats, and Sar goes into Jeremy's room and wakes him and is acting normal, and then reveals that he's actually possessed now. And then Jeremy just gets the fuck out of there. And then Jeremy like wants to tell people, but he can't because everybody will think that he's crazy. But now he knows this thing is out there. And he's the only one who knows, and no one will believe him. And that's the short story.
See, I would have wanted to read that.
Yeah.
There's a part here I love after Sar kind of gets into Jeremy's face, and he just goes, suffice it to, and this is like after Jeremy leaves, he goes, suffice it to say that my escape was largely a matter of luck, a physical wreck fleeing something oblivious to pain or fatigue. But beyond that mere luck, I had been impelled by an almost ecstatic sense of dread produced by his last words to me. The last communication from an alien face, smiling inches from my own, which I choose to take as his final warning. Sometimes we forget to blink.
Huh. I like that.
Yeah, I do. It's better than the ending of the Ceremonies.
Yeah. You mean how they get together in the end and they're just happy?
Mm-hmm. and to add to the 80s classes thing, it has to be at Christmas.
Yes. Like, of course.
It's like I can yeah.
The short story is a really good short story. I like it a lot, and it kind of makes me sad that it's not in print, and we just have this. The only way you can read the short story right now is if you download a book from the Kindle store called The Cthulhu Mythos Mega Pack, 40 modern and classic Lovecraftian tales. That's the only place you can find it right now. But it is in his book Astonishing or Unnerving Tales that's going to be re-released next month.
Nice.
With a title like that, they better be astonishing after this. Mm-hmm. I'll be astonished if I'm not put to sleep by the second.
I will say the reviews for that one are not as high as the reviews for Dark Gods. So I think it'll be worth it just to have access to this short story again.
Yeah. I am curious enough to check out his short fiction, but where I'm at right now after the Ceremonies is T.E.D. Klein is a good writer, but he's not a very good storyteller.
Yeah.
At
least a long-form storyteller.
Yeah, because, 600 pages of just mundane shit at the farm. This is a boring, tedious fucking read. And I just, oh my God. And it's completely forgettable. All these people are hailing it as some kind of classic. I'm like, it took me 2 weeks to read this, and it's been 2 weeks since I finished it now, and I don't remember it. I don't remember the characters' names. I don't remember why Rosebottom thought that this was all so important, or why he had to go through so many hoops to try and get this.
Yeah, there was a lot.
Yeah, he's got like all of these little tiny ceremonies, but it's like, for what? Like, he makes her wear a colored dress one day and a different colored dress another day, and it's like, what the fuck kind of god is going to give a shit about the I know. Like, you've got this dragon in the center of the earth and you're trying to crack open its egg, but it all depends on the color of her dress. Are you fucking kidding me right now?
Oh.
What kind of nonsensical bullshit is this?
Like, this was seafoam green, and it needs to be, like, ocean green.
Oh, yeah. Or a white scarf with the green dress, but you can't do that because it's after Labor Day, and as we all know, the Elder Gods fucking hated Labor Day.
Even, like, her underwear had to be a certain color. It's just so crazy. And, there's a lot of characters in this that I don't think serve much of a purpose. So, like...
we're given an entire community of these basically Amish farmers. It's like they do fuck all for as much as they're on there.
Yeah, like
the
mom
is reduced to by the end of more telling instead of showing. It's like, well, Jeremy's farm had a 3-headed calf born, and Bob's farm, all of the wildlife died, and Julie's first child was born, and she died during pregnancy. Now, that was the one interesting part, is because she gave birth to like some kind of tentacled horror, which I was like, all right. Finally, fucking bring it on. It's like, oh no, we buried it. It's like, well, fucking son of a bitch. Like
they didn't even put like the scene of the birth. I was wanting to see that.
It's just so much that went nowhere. Like SAR's mom could see things. She could predict like the future.
Yeah.
But in the end, that didn't serve anything because she didn't stop it.
She was killed off screen.
Yes. Yep. And then you have a whole scene where they're trying to cleanse his the farm, the Poros farm's house, and so
I thought was going to be some really neat occult ritual.
Yeah.
But it's literally just taking all the furniture out of his house and cleaning it. Well, it goes on for 30 pages of they brought out his dresser, they brought out the table. Now the two virgin girls are going in with a mop because they have to be virgin. Why does everyone in this thing have to be a virgin in order for anything to work?
But one of them wasn't a virgin, and that didn't lead anywhere either. They set this whole thing up where you're like, oh man, she's not, and she lied. Nobody knew, and
you know what? The house still got motherfucking dusted, didn't it? So, I don't think you have to have a hymen to vacuum, but I could.
So it
really gave a blowjob. Get the feather duster away. She can't do this proficiently anymore. She swallowed and no longer knows how to clean house.
Just severely needed an editor to go through, or he needed a map and to look through it and be like, oh, okay, this leads nowhere. Let's erase it. This leads nowhere. Sit and let's keep the line going. Oh my god, this book is just it's wacky. I don't get how people made it through it.
I don't either. And it has so many positive reviews.
Yeah. I don't know why it is so hailed the way it is among the horror community, among horror authors and horror readers. Whatever they're getting out of it, I am completely oblivious to. It's going right over my head. I don't understand what the worshipfulness around this book is about. I don't feel as a reader that my life has improved by virtue of having read this. This is not one of those unmissable classics like, oh my god, this is the book that I have been missing all of my life, and now I have finally read it, and it's like, I want my 2 weeks back.
Well, it's
I want my Saturday back.
2 or 3 books, and I probably would have been in a much improved mood over the last month. I had this fucking swamp of shit for this episode. I look at all the stuff I could have been reading, and it just
oh wow!
But I'm fucking here now, so whatever. What do you guys want to talk about? What else we got?
Hey, we took the bullet for everybody.
Yes.
Yeah, we all suffered through this together.
We did, yeah.
And I also apologize for being the one to recommend this.
I
thought it was going to be.
I don't know if you did. I kind of thought I recommended it.
One of us did. I know I've had it for a couple of years.
Yeah, and
I've wanted to read it.
Yeah, but I was like, well, this is finally an excuse to break it out of my TBR and finally get through this giant classic, this must-read horror novel that everyone loves. And I don't know if one of us is responsible for this. I think maybe we kind of share mutual blame.
I'll put it this way.
I'm going to stop recommending stuff, too, because the last one that I recommended blindly, too, by the way, was The Island, which...
Hey, that was fun. As much as we ripped on it, that was fun.
I think I ended up enjoying that one more than anyone, but I am not at all in that field with the Ceremonies. I'm like, if I recommended this, then I am revoking any responsibilities I have for this show.
I'll say this. It was worth a shot, because it has been heralded and it has King blurbs on it and people talk about Klein. Like, I hear his name quite a bit and all of these things. So it could have been super awesome and we could have really enjoyed it. And it was worth a shot. It's fine. That's the whole point.
All I got reading this were missed opportunities. Like, I kept thinking, like, you could have really brought in some horrors. You could have done more with this ancient entity. You could have done more with, like, this possession aspect of it.
Out of this,
there could have been really good cult elements with this community. Like, you could have made them, like, really fucked up Children of the Corn type cult.
Yes.
Yeah. You know what I got out of this?
Boring ass farmers. What did you get out of it, Rich?
That Ted Klein's a better farmer than Jeremy Clarkson.
Yes.
So true.
That's so true.
Oh my God, that show.
So I take it you watched it though?
Yeah, I've seen Clarkson's Farm.
That's so much fun.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's so funny. Oh, I'm so glad you guys are watching it. It's wholesome and it's fun, and you keep thinking, oh my God, I'm so glad that I'm not him, and and also at the same time you're thinking, I'm so glad I'm smarter than him.
Yes.
Well, I will say,
you know what? One more element of this book that pissed me off, if I can dive into this really quickly.
Yeah. Let's be our last one.
Jeremy is renting this apartment from the farmers, but the farmers are pissed off that he's not contributing and doing labor for them. And I'm like, where the fuck do you get off? You're taking this guy's money and you're pissed off that he's not tilling the fields for you? Like, what delusions are you living in that this guy needs to take up farming because he's renting from you?
Yes.
Like, if I ever rented something and the landlord was like, oh, you really need to get out here and mow the lawn for us and plant some corn, fuck you.
Yes.
I'm paying you guys $90 to shelter here, and that's all I'm doing. Like,
yes.
I'm not going to be shoveling. I'm not going to be planting and farming and picking grapes and whatever other horseshit ideas you have. This is a complete broach of the tenant-landlord situation.
I kept thinking about that too, because this whole town, all against him, and yet at the same time, it's clearly they need money, and he's bringing money into the community, and yet they still are like hating this guy, and it's just
well, he's an outsider.
It felt so forced.
This whole book felt forced.
I will say we have something good lined up for next week, though. I've already read this story, and I think we're going to have a really good discussion about this story. And it's going to be Havoc by Mike Thorne. And Mike Thorne's actually going to be on the podcast with us to discuss it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Because after I read Havoc, I had to message Mike right away and talk about the story. And he was intrigued by, like, my thought process about it. So he wants to come on and, like, kind of see our interpretations of it, and we can have, like, a discussion about the story.
Nice.
Is this from his collection Peel Back and See?
It's the first story from his collection Peel Back and See.
And so, just so we're clear, this story, there is actually something that happens in it that we can discuss, unlike the Ceremonies.
Yes. There is
for 600 fucking pages, it seems like we didn't have a whole lot to actually talk about for such a massive fucking book.
We had a lot to complain about for such a massive book.
Yes.
There is things to discuss in the story. It is quite philosophical in some ways.
You did say it gets into
bleak. It's very bleak. and it gets into some cosmic horror, and it's just a really good Mike Thorne story. So I think we'll have a good time with it. And it's much better than the Ceremonies. But
and shorter.
And as always, be sure to please give us some comments on Apple reviews. Give us some likes online. It helps us in the algorithm grow our podcast. Make sure the Abyss consumes all. And be sure to follow our podcast on Twitter at Into Staring.
You can tell us why you love the Ceremonies.
Yeah, honestly, we should tweet that. What makes the Ceremonies good?
Yeah.
I'll tweet that out later.
Explain it to us, because I don't understand why this is so revered.
Yeah.
Vilme, where can listeners get in touch with you? I know you're taking a little social media hiatus.
Yes, I am actually taking a social media hiatus, at least on Twitter. I'm trying to step away a little bit from that. That's partly, I think, the reason for the burnout. But I'm pretty active on TikTok right now, so you can find me on TikTok at Vitsememest.
All right. And Matt, what about you?
I am on Twitter at BrandenburgDM.
And Mike?
You can also find me on Twitter at MikeH5856.
You can follow me on Twitter at Rudy53088. And this is Richard Gerlach saying, keep staring.